Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to the Nifty Niggly Niche Cast. We are recording this on Tuesday, the 3rd of September, and as always, we've got lots of fabulous Aotearoa sporting action to discuss. We just had a New Zealand cricket announcement about the Blackcaps contracts with Nathan Smith and Josh Clarkson getting the contract thingy-majiggy. So that's pretty interesting. Not necessarily about as always, not necessarily about the actual contracts, but more so what they represent, because we've now got a fairly comprehensive vista that the Blackcaps are going younger. And this is happening at all in all formats, all situations, squad selection, contract selection, and all that stuff. There is a focus on a lot of new, younger players, and to be honest, it coincides with the introduction of Sam Wells as chief selector going back to the ODI World Cup last year ahead of the Bangladesh Test series, where Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra suddenly became first 11 Test cricketers. Well, that wasn't Rachin Ravindra, because that was still when old Henry Nicholls was loitering around the Blackcaps Test team. But I, just off the top of my head, having seen that announcement, I'm like, wow, this is pretty comprehensive. There's a lot of young players coming into the Blackcaps setup at the moment, so we will discuss that later on. Do you have any thoughts off the top of your dome, Governor, about the young wave sweeping over the Blackcaps?
I wondered if the pattern you were talking about was going to be the Blackcaps going back towards, seam bowling all-rounders who bowl probably under 135 Ks, just like 2008 all over again, It's a national heritage there. It is, Nathan Smith felt like he hasn't actually played for the Blackcaps yet. Now he's got a contract already, but he does feel like a dude who's been brewing, who's been waiting. And Josh Clarkson has had some good opportunities, and it feels like Smith is probably, I think Smith can play all formats, but it feels like he's probably long-term in terms of like what his career will peak at. Feels like he's more of a test player down the line, and Clarkson is definitely a limited overs type of player. So you sort of got one of each there as well, which is another nice way of balancing things out. These are obviously the contracts that were voided by Devon Conway and Finn Allen, right?
Correct. I agree with Nathan Smith. Like he seems like a fantastic Test cricket prospect. However, I do believe he will make his Blackcaps debut in ODI or T20 cricket this summer. So,
yeah,
that's how the Blackcaps have developed talent for a long time. So we'll chat some cricket later on in the podcast. Today we are going to put a big old spotlight on Aotearoa football. We got so many layers, so many wrinkles, so many hot pockets of Aotearoa football to discuss. And of course, we'll be here for our regular rugby league chat as well. If you didn't know by now, we are from the niche-case.com, where you can read about Aotearoa sporting matters. Got a couple of Kiwi-NRL spotlights fresh on the website. We got Lavinia Tauhalaliku. She made her debut for the Cowboys in NRLW. She's from Southern Cross campus, same school that Malehofonga went to, same school that Leka Halasima went to. And there's also Elijah Salisa Leao Moana and Jerome Falemoy, who are in the Knight system, and they're all from Southern Cross campus. So that's a lovely little hot pocket of rugby league in Aotearoa. So I did a spotlight on Lavinia Tauhalaliku. Also did a Kiwi-NRL spotlight on Ali Leotawa, who he was pretty good against the Sharks, but he's been pretty good at rugby league for his whole life, to be honest. Like going through his stats, he just churns out line breaks he's churned out line breaks in the NRL this season prior to that game against the Sharks. And he's done it for a couple years of New South Wales Cup footy. So there's all sorts of information there. Chat a bit more about that in the rugby league section. But both of those yarns are on the website right now, as is the Flying Kiwis wrap-up of Kiwi footballers around the world, much of which we will be discussing today. Also did a early guide to the domestic cricket season for women's cricket. That is on the website as well, that you can read about, going through some of the major trends and bits and pieces of the women's domestic cricket landscape. I imagine we'll have a White Ferns T20 squad that I can break down for the website as well. Sophie Devine she didn't necessarily step down as T20 captain right now, but she's going to wait till the T20 World Cup, and who cares? What else do we have? We've got I don't know. Anything else?
White's coming up. I've got a squad recap on that. Bit of a yarn. Couple things have changed since then. A few of those we will talk about on this episode, no doubt. Haven't done it yet, but I do want to write an Auckland FC sort of off-season update kind of thing as well, giving people a bit of a scope on how they've been going through pre-season games and squad building and whatnot. Did do a little bit in the newsletter actually on that, along with the Wellington Phoenix, and kind of mirroring them and looking at them together, and maybe we'll talk about that as well. We'll see how that goes. But yeah, there's plenty of stuff going on.
Shout out to the newsletter. You can sign up to our free newsletter every Monday and Friday, full of New Zealand sports information, thenichecase.substack.com. And we also do a bonus podcast every week. Couldn't do it last week, but we are going to do it this week on Thursday. Bonus podcast for all the generous folks supporting us through Patreon and with a paid Substack subscription. So you can help us out, and then we give you the bonus podcast every week for supporting and funding the Niche Case. And we're just out here doing our best, and we always start with a little bit of mindfulness. So you locked and loaded there, Mr. Nottingham Wood, the woodsman.
Nottingham Wood. It is poetic that a guy called Wood would be playing for a team called Forest, I guess. It's been mentioned before. Apparently my favorite spin on this is I think it's the Chinese language, the symbol for wood and the symbol for forest. The symbol for forest is just three versions of the symbol for wood. As in, 3 trees makes a forest, I guess, maybe is the limit. There's 2 trees is just 2 trees, 1 tree is 1 tree, 3 trees is a forest. So Wood playing for Forest. That one got some spin when he scored a hat-trick last season in the game. 3 times Wood and Forest, and nice alignment there, I suppose.
Can I just interject with a bit of mindfulness from myself?
Please.
You got to be able to see the wood through the forest.
I love it. Right up there alongside this Immanuel Kant quote, which says, "To be human is a powerful, profound thing that deserves a lot of patience."
I had to chuckle because it's powerful, profound, and then you need patience.
Yeah.
So I know I'm bloody pissed off at all these people telling me I need patience, Screw patience.
Well, that's a powerful and profound feeling, I suppose. And that's exactly why the patience is needed. So, in a way, that's kind of like the essence of this mindfulness segment, isn't it? It's try to figure it out. There's a lot of stuff at play here, but also don't expect the easy answer straight away. It is a little bit harder than that, and it takes time.
I concur. I'm going to drop a little announcement right now. And This is something we've been tracking for a long time. But we're dealing with a sporting phase. And obviously every New Zealand team, every national team, they love Aotearoa. But I'm actually going to look this up because I want to do stuff like this a bit more often, because statistics, facts, figures, a lot of the time the collective we just use them to reinforce our argument.
They're good like that.
With people have an idea, and then you go looking for the statistics to suit that argument. And I'm looking here because I got a sneaky suspicion that prior to the 2017 World Cup, Rugby League World Cup disaster for New Zealand, in which they lost to Tonga and Fiji. Prior to that disaster, there was, I don't believe the Kiwis played any tests in New Zealand. So we'll go like, okay, Anzac Test match, that was in Canberra. 2016, they toured England. Test versus Australia. 2016, end of 2016, that was in Perth. Anzac Test 2016, that was in Newcastle. 2015, they had a tour of England. And then we go back to 2015, they played Australia in Brisbane, and we have to go back to the Four Nations final in 2014 when the Kiwis played in, they won that game in Wellington, and that was part of a Four Nations campaign in New Zealand. For the next, basically 2 years, they didn't play any tests in New Zealand. So the Aotearoa Kiwis went into that World Cup with a connection to Aotearoa New Zealand as a team that represents New Zealand, but they hadn't actually invested anything in connecting to the community by being in New Zealand. And then you wonder why some players didn't want to represent New Zealand. Like, it kind of makes sense. But that is to say the New Zealand national teams, they represent New Zealand. And at this stage, we've got the Wellington Phoenix going all in on representing Aotearoa. They've got pipelines, they've got junior academies for men, women. They're playing local games in Porirua. I see the Wellington Phoenix set the trend down in Wellington because now the Wellington Lions, they can't draw a big enough crowd at the Cape Town, so they're also playing in. I've seen them play a few games in Porirua as well. That is to say, Wellington Phoenix, they love Aotearoa. We've seen the Auckland FC, as we're going to talk about. They've signed a lot of new players because they're starting a whole new franchise, and they're going all in on signing Aotearoa talent. Maybe too much, because you seem to be a bit annoyed about the Kiwis who are beyond the A-League coming back to the A-League. So maybe Auckland FC they're going too hard in signing Aotearoa talent. And of course the Warriors, they've come back to Aotearoa during the pandemic phase, and they have invested heavily in connection to community and the land of Aotearoa. This is an announcement. This is a public service announcement, and I want to take our opinions out of what the Breakers are doing, because the Breakers have a couple Kiwi players, but they are doing the opposite of the Warriors. Like, the Breakers are doing the opposite of Auckland FC. The Breakers are doing the opposite of Wellington Phoenix. So my message, I'm getting ahead of myself. My message to fans is that the Breakers are not investing in that connection to community. Like, we don't even know if the Breakers have like a development pipeline. They don't seem to have any women's teams, let alone their whole coaching staff isn't from New Zealand. Much of the ownership
hasn't been from New Zealand for like 3 years. This isn't even the first time they've had an all foreign coaching staff.
And that's because most of the ownership isn't from New Zealand. Now the number of New Zealand players has decreased. So my message to listeners, sporting fans, is that the Breakers are neglecting the connection to Aotearoa that these other sporting franchises are embracing. And that's all good. That's all good. Like, it is what it is. But as observers of New Zealand sport, I'm relaying that message to fans of New Zealand sport. And it's also worth saying that the New Zealand Breakers in no way, shape or form represent Aotearoa basketball, because Aotearoa basketball is booming. But the Breakers do not reflect that. So it's another noteworthy interjection. All of which is fine. Because let's be honest, if the Breakers are winning, none of that matters. Like, the Warriors would want to win, And they lost a lot of big games at Mount Smart. You go back to Anzac Day against the Titans, round 1 against the Sharks, need to win to send Shaun Johnson off on a high at Mount Smart Stadium. They lose that game. They lose to the Eels. The Warriors have been losing at Mount Smart, but they get over 23,000 people at Mount Smart. The Breakers, if the Breakers are winning with no New Zealanders, that's all good. But I have a sneaky suspicion that connection to Aotearoa, connection to community, is an asset for these sporting teams. So if the Breakers win without that, I'll learn. I'll observe and I will learn about that. And I will give credit to the Breakers if they are winning. And then I check in with the newsletter, thenichecase.substack.com. I scroll down the White Fern stats. We got some county tour cricket stats. Taintua Picky's fantastic. We got NRLW. The top 4 teams all have a bunch of ladies from Aotearoa. Malihufunga's first for tries, first for line breaks, second for tackle bus. I scroll past the National League football yarns in our newsletter. I scroll past the Wellington Phoenix and Auckland FC yarns in our newsletter. And then I get to the Breakers. They played 2 NBL preseason games. First game, they lost by 44 points. Second game, they lost by 35 points. So if the Breakers are winning without any New Zealand connection, that's all good. I won't kick up a fuss. But if you're neglecting New Zealand and a thriving, blossoming basketball scene in Aotearoa, and you're losing by 44 points and 35 points in preseason NBL basketball, that's just funny. It's just hilarious. Not good, not bad, not annoying. It's just funny. It just makes me chuckle. So my question to you after that is, have you got any basketballing insights as to how the overseas Breakers have lost by 44 points and then 35 points in their NBL preseason games?
Well, do you remember 2 years ago, they made the NBL finals. They went to a decisive game 5, it must have been. I don't think they go all the way to 7s in the NBL. They went to a decisive game 5, but the instinct of a basketball watcher is to say decisive game 7. But unfortunately, that's just NBA, whatever that word is, bleeding into everything else. Maybe there's a little bit of that in terms of how the Breakers are run as well. There's an instinct that relates to a different league rather than this league. I mean, that team was dominated by 3 extremely good imports and a foreign coach who was pretty awesome. That's frankly normal. That's how you win in the NBL. You have to have good imports. Those imports are going to be your best players. So no one's saying they need to be signing Kiwi players who can just come in and be the best on show. But they had a few solid Kiwi players in there, and they had more than that, because it doesn't just have to be about the players. And we know they didn't have any Kiwi coaches that year either. But what they did have was they made a big song and dance, and whether they actually did this in practice, I don't know, but it seemed to coincide. They made a song and dance about connecting with the roots of the organization, with the community, with the Kiwi spirit. So that even the foreign players coming in were trying to play basketball in a way that represented their fans and represented the nation that they're playing in. That's all stuff you can do without having any. You don't need Kiwis scoring 20 points a night in your lineup to be able to doing that. You don't need guys you don't even need a New Zealand player in the starting lineup to be able to do those kind of things. Which is why it's so weird that 2 years later they've gone in the exact opposite direction. And they did it. It's not like it happened. Last year was trending towards this as well. They had a really successful year, and then they stopped doing the things that made them successful. But I mean, the roster's complete now. We've said this as it was going. Where are all the Kiwi players? Why are they signing these sort of middling Aussie fellas? What's going on here? We've had these conversations. even aside from that, so like let's just look at every player on that roster as a citizen of the world. Forget where they were born or who they represent or whatever. I just don't think it's a very good basketball team, you know? I just don't think I don't think it's a well-constructed roster. And I think this has been something that's when when they had that one brilliant year under Modi Mayor and they made the final, it was a fantastically constructed roster. Last year, I don't think it was. They brought in imports that played in the same position as in the same role as like their best local players in Finn Delaney and Will McDowell White. And coincidentally, not coincidentally, those two have since left. They've gone back to Europe and playing professionally somewhere else instead. And yeah, it's just like Parker Jackson Cartwright is awesome. The only reason he's not playing in the NBA is because he's really short. Like if he was 6 inches taller, he'd probably be on an NBA roster getting rotation minutes, but he's not. Well, you take what you can get for the Breakers in the NBL. Someone like there's gonna if you want players of that level, there's gonna be some fatal flaw, and him being a little bit short is fine because he's proven he's still a first team All NBA player. If he gets injured, they're buggered because their other two imports haven't played in the league before. They might be amazing. Who knows? It's too early to judge. But this array of Australian players that they've signed. It's not like they're signing Aussie internationals like first choice dudes. Like Jonah Bolden's played NBA, sure. He also, at the age of like 24 or 25, retired from basketball and said he wanted to get into trading cryptocurrency. Um, 3 years later, he came back last year and played for the Sydney Kings off the bench. Didn't really do much. The Breakers have signed him, saying, "Well, this is guys so much talent. He's played in the NBA. We can get him back to the levels he's capable of." So he's a project player. He's not a player they've signed on the basis of what he did last season. He's a player they've signed on the basis of what they think he could be capable of. Mojave King, same thing, drafted into the NBA. Didn't do anything there. Like I think he did a little bit of summer league, but then mostly played G League and wasn't actually that good in G League either. Like his G League numbers are not very flash. His NBL numbers when he was a Knicks star weren't very flash. He hasn't actually done anything in terms of basketball production at this kind of level or higher to warrant the sort of expectation they have for him going into the season, which doesn't mean he can't do it, but he's like 22 or something. He's not going to be a prospect anymore for the NBA. That age, those players are already in the NBA or they're not. You can get there, but it's not as a young hotshot. You've got to earn your way there. You need production, not just potential. Guys like Mitch McCarron is a solid veteran who can't really shoot. Well, is that what this team needs? The short point guard, and we'll see. But like he's a tidy, smart, clever player, but he's not necessarily. I don't know if that's a fantastic fit alongside PJC, but we will see. Sean Besto as well, like pretty average shooting numbers in college, solid-ish player, but I think there are New Zealanders who are as good as that guy, who they could have gone for instead. But we're ignoring the nationality aspect here. So let's just say it's an unenthusiastic kind of signing. Like then there's just even if like let's be fair about some of the young I've dropped my own nationality rule here. Let's be fair about some of the Kiwi players as well. Like Max Starling on a full level contract played 1 minute last season as a development player. Like, is he going to come in here and be able to produce consistent kind of NBL stuff? Is someone like Carlin Davison, who maybe is, but he hardly got a chance. In fact, he didn't get a chance last season. He never actually got on the court. Sam Meninga in his second year in the NBL, how much can you rely on him? Dane Pino is the third center behind him. He didn't do anything last season. They've sort of just taken up a spot there. Like I just don't think this is a very good roster. And if it is going to be a good roster, it's going to be because a lot of players who have unfulfilled potential or unfulfilled capabilities are going to start reaching those capabilities. That's what they need in order for this to be a good team. That seems to require good, experienced coaching, the likes of which Modi Mayor might well have given them. Like they started building this roster expecting Modi Mayor to be the coach, and I actually think he's got a track record at the Breakers of being able to take players to another level as in their development. And with some of these players, I think he would have been fantastic for Mojave King, for example. He would have been exactly the kind of role model he needs. Is Petteri Koponen going to be that guy? Maybe. Like he's a great player. He's clearly a highly regarded basketballing mind. He's also never been a head coach at any comparable level before. So you've got a rookie head coach, you've got a whole bunch of project players, and you don't seem to have an identity or a like sort of anchor to the community you represent or to the team that you're trying to build or whatever. There's just nothing there that hints that this is going to be a tough, gritty, competitive kind of team. Like that sounds to me like the kind of team that would lose games by 35 and 44 points come regular season, because I don't know how well, like, is that team going to be able to bounce back when the chips are against them kind of thing? It doesn't feel that way. Doesn't feel like they're going to have the fight that we saw from them under Mody Maor, but maybe we'll be proved wrong. I just happen to think that, well, I happen to have already thought that that was just not a very strong Breakers roster. And then they got smoked in a couple of preseason games, which only goes to further enhance that inclination, because it's not these aren't facts. These aren't like, this isn't known stuff yet. The season hasn't started. Preseason results don't matter. Don't really know how much, like, maybe he's just like giving everyone minutes, working through some ideas. It is a new coach as well, so you can't expect everything to just be clicking from day one. So we can we can disregard these results to some extent, but you're not looking good. It's not looking great. But then all this just seems to emphasize what we've been saying about them all along, isn't it? It's like, well, these things that we're talking about, these like connective ideas, are not just fan service or whatever. It's actually part of how you win games in a league like this, and the Breakers just aren't doing that.
And once again, it's just preseason. So maybe the Breakers, they find some juice and they start to ramp it up. They win some games, and maybe they get one of their imports in, Matt Mooney. No idea who he is, so I had to look him up. Matt Mooney, he's obviously not from New Zealand. And he played in the NBA. Wowza. Another exceptional NBA player for the New Zealand Breakers. He played 4 games for Cleveland in 2019-2020, which can't imagine Cleveland were too good in that period. And he played 1 game for New York in 2021-22. Once again, well, he played 2 minutes in that game, and he played 4.8 minutes per game for Cleveland. And I don't think the New York Knicks were too good in 2021-2022. So shout out to Breakers superstar Matt Mooney. Would love to see you playing for the Breakers, because maybe you, Matt Mooney, can help the Breakers not lose by 44 points and then 35 points. And that's the Breakers. I have been able to watch a bit of Chris Wood for the Forest, for the Nottinghams, and he's a pretty interesting striker to watch, I reckon. Now, my first observation about Chris Wood at Nottingham Forest was the game. It must have been this weekend's game. The referee and the 2 linos, when they lined up together, I had a good chuckle, because they were just 3 bald Pakeha guys. I was like, man, this is quintessential England football. You just got 3 baldies who are half Pakeha, half Palangi, refereeing a game of Premier League football. Doesn't mean anything. I just found it funny when they were all standing there together. So shout out to them. Chris Wood. But I've seen a couple games now, and I think these 2 ideas play into each other, because Chris Wood does a lot of like hard mahi. He's a gritty footballer who is always ripping in like outside of the striker parameters, because he is, in theory, he is a typical football striker. And then you find him like, I think it was the game last week, he got a yellow card, and it was just like a professional slide tackle to shut down the play. And like when I was watching it, they were like, straight away, they were like, that's a yellow card. And then as the seconds ticked along, they were like, that's a really good tackle from Chris Wood. He shut down the play. Needed to be done. And I was like, bang, that's Chris Wood. Definite yellow card, but also a necessary tackle. So, and I like that from Chris Wood.
Take one for the team.
Yeah, that's what he does. And then this week, he also had a goal disallowed because he was offside, and I'm not sure if you've got the Chris Wood offside stats handy. We can dive into that because he does love to be offside. But he also had a handball situation in his own box, where in that game there were a couple of those instances where the players weren't watching the ball, but the ball hit their hand, so it wasn't a handball, so it wasn't a penalty. But I was like, damn, that's Chris Wood. He's in his own box. It was from a set piece, like a free kick, I think, and he was there. He was defending. And that's what Chris Wood does. Sometimes, though, his defense, his like chasing back to make a tackle, means that he isn't up the field when Nottingham Forest turn the ball over. So it's an interesting situation because sometimes I do think, like, where's Chris Wood? Nottingham Forest are making a break, and then you look to the middle, to the box, where Chris Wood is normally there, but he's not there. And I was thinking, like, where's Chris Wood? He's the striker. He should be in the middle. He should be right there to tap in a goal. And you kind of I get a little bit, oh, that's not very good. Like, you're a striker, bro. You're meant to be there. But then you rewind and you think about it some more, and you're like, well, he made the tackle to start that whole movement. And that's Chris Wood in a nutshell. Like, he does so much defensive work that he's in his own box, that he's getting a yellow card to shut down a fast break, that he's making a key tackle in his own half, which stops him from being in the box to score a goal. But Chris Wood does score goals. So he's there, if he's not doing his defensive work, he is there doing his regular mahi up the field. But another thing I like about this Nottingham Forest team is it's quite a creative team. There's a lot of some good dribblers, but most importantly, there's a I don't know too much about any other players, but I think it's Gibbs White.
Yeah, Morgan Gibbs White.
Morgan Gibbs White. He is
there, number 10. He set up 3 or 4 of Chris Wood's goals last season.
Right, so there you go. So he is a very good passer of the football, and he's also a very creative passer. And I was thinking, assuming that Chris Wood is in his regular striking position because he's not doing all this defensive work, that Gibbs White dude seems like a fantastic player to have getting the footy to Chris Wood, because he's not just like, here, I'm going to pass you the ball along the carpet or in the air with the inside of my foot, boot, come together, good stuff. He might do a little chip pass. He might go with the outside of the boot. He might go left foot, right foot. That Gibbs White dude is a really good passer, and I think that is very useful for Chris Wood, as you just outlined, and it's something that I think the All Whites can build towards, because there's a lot of good passes in that midfield for the All Whites. Sarpreet Singh, Marco Stamenic, Joe Bell. They're not as creative, they're not as clinical with their passes as Gibbs White, but I do think that's something the All Whites can build on. But when I'm watching Nottingham Forest, I'm having a lot of fun because, as a hearty Kiwi myself, I'm enjoying his defensive work, but I'm also admiring the creativity that Nottingham Forest have to get the ball to Chris Wood.
That defensive stuff with Chris Wood, I reckon that, he was always someone who would get back for set pieces and just be an aerial presence, flick headers away, do that kind of stuff. I reckon his pressing game and sort of the mobility of his defensive work really ramped up when he was at Newcastle, and he found himself in a situation where that was a team moving upwards very quickly and buying a lot of quite skilled players, where maybe he was seen as a dude who was, I don't know, I guess just underskilled compared to, not so much compared to his teammates, but maybe compared to the ambition of his club, perhaps. He was always kind of seen as a stopgap there. And I think that kind of leveled up his game in a lot of other ways, where he worked even harder. He threw himself around even more in order just to be as useful in as many ways as he could. And that was all right at Newcastle. I've continued while it was happening, and then since it happened, I've continued to defend his time and his performances at Newcastle. But it was obvious that was never a long-term situation. And Nottingham Forest, he's found himself in a bit more of a comfortable home. Um, but I think that is something that he's been able to carry in, is he's getting back to being able to be like the main man, the target, not just a player that the team plays around or the guy who's just there to fill in a role now and there. Well, other guys are like more expensive strikers are injured, but he's actually there as the main man, which is a role he's earned by the goals that he's scored in the games he's played for Forest. But he's got a bit of a mix because he's got the Burnley target man stuff, but he's also got the Newcastle more mobility and off the ball work rate and stuff like that. It's not just hang around on the last man and try flick on headers or hold the ball up with your chest or whatever. Which is why I think his offsides have dropped off in the last few years. Like when he was at Burnley, he was one of the most offside players in the Premier League, and it was awesome because the more he's getting offside, the more he was, asking of the defensive lines, and you might catch him offside 3 times in a game, but the 4th time he gets through and he scores, and that's the decisive moment in the match kind of thing. He was offside 3 times in this game against Wolves on the weekend, which maybe that's a good thing as well. Is shown a little bit more of that, but then at the same time, he did lose a potential winning goal because of an offside. But that was unlucky. That was like he was offside when the ball was diverted towards him, but then he was onside when he kicked it. So it was just kind of one of those letter of the law type ones where, completely correct call, but unlucky because it's not like he did anything. It's not like he was trying to push the boundaries or anything. It's just the way that fell to him was a little bit awkward and caught him offside. But he scored a nice goal earlier on, hitting the ball through traffic. That's his 2nd goal in 3 games this season. He has scored in both home games so far. And I think it's pretty helpful that those goals have come in home games at a time where Nottingham Forest have been trying very, very hard to sign a new striker. And there's a Mexican guy who plays for Feyenoord. They had it all sorted. They had the fee finally arranged. And then the guy was like, I don't know about that. I actually don't think I'm going to do this. And personal terms couldn't be arranged. I guess he just didn't want to be Chris Wood's backup because Chris Wood's in such hot form. I guess is the most likely outcome there. They went for Eddie Nketiah from Arsenal, where he went to Crystal Palace instead. I guess probably just wanting to not have to move house, stay in London. Seems like a fair enough answer. Pretty similar statured clubs. There's a couple other guys. There's was it a Greek striker or something like that? I can't remember, but they had like 4 or 5 names that they were linked to, and they actually didn't end up signing anyone, which is great because that just leaves us with Chris Wood as the main man, at least until January, with no doubt. Anyone who came in would have to, like, even if they paid decent coin for him, they would still have to prove himself above Chris Wood because Chris Wood's got the money in the bank. He's got the points on the board with he's scored 13 goals in 19 games since Nuno Espirito Santo became the manager of Nottingham Forest, which is pretty crazy. Like, you never quite know how those managerial changes can go. Often it's very vulnerable thing where a new manager comes in with new ideas. He wants new players and some guys get moved on. Chris Wood had the opposite effect. A manager came in, liked him, and then he's just kicked on to a new level. So, yeah, fantastic start from him to begin the season. And let's hope he carries that on into the international break for the All Whites. He's gonna be available for those games. He's traveling to America, play against Mexico, play against USA, see what he can do. Sarpreet Singh as his international version of Morgan Gibbs White. Why not? Looking forward to that. I've said it when it was named. Like, that is a strong All Whites team. Other than Callum McCallum being injured, borderline the strongest team they've ever picked. Although there are 1 or 2 little injury things, we'll see how that goes. Because I think Tyler Bindon had a head knock on the weekend, for example. So hopefully he's all right. I haven't heard anything about him not traveling yet, but we'll see.
Did the bunker intervene for the old Bindon head knock?
Nah, just the physio. No bunker, but he actually, I haven't seen the footage, but because what happened is he just fell and hit his head on the ground. It wasn't a swinging arm, it wasn't a high shoulder or anything like that. He just went up for an aerial, landed awkwardly off balance because he got bumped in the air, and Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe you could argue a tackle in midair or something like that. I don't know if you get a sin bin for that, but he might have got a penalty. But he walked off all right. There was no blood or anything. He just was maybe a little bit dazed, and the physio said we're not taking chances. His team were, I think, 2-0 up at the time. They went on to win, so no dramas. Hopefully he's all right. But if he does skip the all whites duty, it would also make sense. You just probably don't want to jump on a plane if you do have concussion symptoms. He might not, but we'll see.
That just reminded me, I was watching the Raiders beat the Roosters in the NRL, and I think it might have been Joseph Tarpany. Joseph Tarpany is just always awesome. But the Raiders got penalised because one of the Roosters fell and their head hit the Raiders' knee. So the Raiders were penalised for a high tackle because the Roosters player fell into the knee of the Raiders player, which was typical NRL hilarity. And another little NRL football crossover. You said mobility a lot there with Chris Wood. Are you meaning more like work rate with a bit of speed?
I don't think speed is really in the Chris Wood bag, but you see behind me on the video, the old distance covered there, bit of 8.7 kilometers. That's not heaps. Like a midfielder in a football game will go over 12 kilometers or something like that. But for a target man striker who you don't think of as someone who would move around a whole lot, that's a fair amount. Like he's not someone who's making lots of back and forth runs in behind the defense or whatever. So yeah, the mobility just in terms of how much ground he covers specifically off the ball. He's not really a dribbler at all, but yeah, off the ball, but when his team doesn't have the ball, I guess is more what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
The ways he'll drop in behind and like cut off passing lanes and that kind of stuff. Just staying active without being directly involved.
Yeah, I think being active and work rate are probably like more to the point of what Chris Wood does. I don't want to talk too much shit because I use mobility a lot for rugby league players, but in my head I'm thinking there are rugby league players who are massive and not necessarily mobile, where you assume everyone in football is quote unquote mobile, which got me thinking, like, you hear a lot about leg speed in the NRL. He's got great leg speed. It would be hilarious if someone started to bust out the leg speed in football. Because as soon as someone says,
foot speed, baby.
That's
foot
the thing.
Speed, I could see that, like throwing step overs and stuff, quick sharp turns, able to change directions and quick like little movements. But
no, but
leg speed would be a new one.
Leg speed is just speed.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's literally what it is. So when you hear, for anyone watching a lot of NRL, when you hear leg speed, they're just saying they're fast. And if it would be hilarious if someone in football was like, yeah, Chris Wood, he's got great leg speed. And everyone's like, you mean he's just fast?
Yeah, unless you run with your hands. The leg speed can only, that's where the speed comes from, I guess, isn't it? Is running with your legs. So that's the only way that happens. I guess maybe Chris Wood might have aerial speed. He jumps quickly. Well,
it's like
he doesn't have that, but
you can have hand speed.
Might.
Like cricket batters have good hand speed.
Yeah,
you can have good hand speed in rugby league with passing the ball. Like you can have speed. Speed for humans comes from your feet and your legs. So to specify they have leg speed just seems a bit weird, considering everyone's speed is based on how they're running. Then we differentiate it further. They got a good hand speed, and that's basically it. You can't have head speed or shoulder speed, or that's too deep in the mangroves though.
You could be quick thinking if you want to take it that way, but that kind of means a completely different thing.
Yeah, exactly. You did mention Sarpreet Singh. So Sarpreet Singh, after we recorded our podcast last week, Sarpreet Singh has a deal lined up. What's the latest with Sarpreet Singh?
Yeah, he's joined a second division club in Portugal called UD Leiria. Let me see if I can find the full Portuguese. Sarpreet Singh is right here. His club is called União de Leiria, Portuguese Liga 2. Liga 2, I don't know The Portuguese is a tricky language because it sounds so much like the far more common Spanish, but it's not entirely like they chuck an e's all the time, and yeah, just I'll get used to that now because we actually haven't had a whole lot of New Zealanders playing in Portugal. There have been a couple in recent years. Jana Radosavljevic coincidentally just signed with the Portuguese women's club like a week before Sarpreet Singh signed with his team. Tyler Boyd spent some time there. Nando Pijnaker and Ollie White spent some time in academy teams there. Didn't really play first team football in Portugal, but there's been a couple in recent years. Sarpreet Singh would be the most notable beyond Boyd, who did actually had a couple nice seasons in the top division there. Mostly the one season he was out on loan, I think, was his best year, but that was on loan at a fellow first division club. Sarpreet Singh is going to the second division, which seems a lot like the Elijah Just move recently, where Elijah Just signed with SK and St. Pölten in Austria as their second division, which really felt quite underwhelming because he was linked to a top division club in Sweden less than a year ago. And that was partly because they had a coach who was one of his old coaches, and that coach has since been sacked because he wasn't actually that good of a coach, which is why he was an old coach, and etc. Your coaching career is maybe not on the best levels where he quit. Technically, he quit to take up another job, but it seemed like one of those quit before he was pushed. This is a fellow who used to coach just at Horsens, and then he coached AFK Göteborg when they tried to sign Elijah Just. He left that job voluntarily to become an assistant coach at another club. So when you're quitting a head coach role to be an assistant coach, you sort of know the writing's on the wall, I think. So Just has gone to a second division team, which felt like he could have done better. Saying it feels like he could have done better. But then both of them, like, Singh just needs to play football. Just had been playing decent amounts of football for Horsens, so it's a little bit more of a surprise he didn't trade up. But then look at the situations, I think, clarify, like the club situation, I think clarify this a little bit more, especially in light of how Matt Garbutt turned what seemed like an average move into a fantastic move when his team got promoted into the Eredivisie in Netherlands. So these things can change quickly with the right environment, with the right results. However, only one team gets promoted out of the Austrian Bundesliga 2, and St. Pölten don't look like they're going to be that team. So it's like I'm struggling to see how Just would get that same boost. But Sarpreet Singh's team, pretty solid. I think it's they used to be a regular first team. In fact, they were actually Udi Leiria was actually coached. I think it was the second job as a head coach for Jose Mourinho back in the day. He left there to join Porto and then won the Champions League with Porto, and the rest is history. So they used to be a pretty big club that was sort of pushing around, competing for European spots, and then they financially blew it out and had to go back to the third division. Spent a decade getting out of the third division back into the second division. They kept finishing like top five but not quite getting promotion. Then a couple of years ago, they won that division up to the second division, steady, sort of staying in the, like, established themselves in that division last season. This season, now they seem to be pushing on to try and get promotion. That's where Sarpreet Singh has joined this team, as in a little bit more of an upwardly mobile thing for a team where he should be able to get good minutes. Least, like, I mean, if things struggle, he's still living coastally in Portugal, which is just a beautiful place to be. So he should be happy. Son will be smiling. It's a move that feels at first kind of similarly almost disappointing to Elijah Just's move, but then I think, yeah, having dug a little deeper into that, I start to see the vision a little bit more, and it does seem like it seems like a lot more of an upwardly mobile move for Singh, who has signed a 1-year deal with a 2-year option. I think the translations on this make it a little bit tricky, but I think that's what they're saying, is if things go well after the first year, there's a 2-year extension that can be triggered. If things don't go well, he can just bail out and find another club like he did this year. So supposedly he had some options. There was that link with Des Buckingham's team, or maybe QPR, both of them being championship clubs at the moment. But I think that was a little bit more, as a speculation, but that felt like an agent plant kind of rumor rather than a club saying we actually want to sign this guy and we're getting it out there in the public so that people know about it and we can bargain with this. I think that was a bit more of an agent saying, I've got this player and he's good. And if I link him to these clubs, I can get other clubs to say, oh, well, if they like him, we like him too. We'll try to sign him. And maybe that's actually what happened. Like maybe that leveraged him into this move. I don't know. But bottom line of the story here is that Sarpreet Singh will be playing second division in Portugal once he gets back from the All Whites tour of North America. And I have high hopes for him. Hopefully, well, first of all, he's just got to stay fit and he's got to get games in and he's got to get those minutes in his legs. But I have high hopes if he does that this is a level he can not only play really well at, but also a level where he can hopefully push towards promotion. If he's playing well, his team are going to be scoring goals. If they're scoring goals, they're going to be winning games. If they're winning games, they're going to be the type of team that can challenge for higher honors to get up into the top tier.
I've just found a tweet. I searched Ben Waine on Twitter and I found a tweet about Plymouth Argyle and Wayne Rooney, the coach extraordinaire. He's coached 4 games this season. They've got no wins, 2 goals scored, 7 goals conceded. You love a bit of XG. Lowest XG 4 in the championship, highest XG against in the championship. And they just loaned out footballing extraordinaire Ben Waine. So Ben Waine has gone to Mansfield. Is it like Mansfield Town or something?
Yeah, Mansfield Town. That's
Mansfield Town FC. So why did a team that sucks get rid of Ben Waine?
I guess because when you suck, you tend to get more conservative and you want to play experienced players that you know what you're going to get from them. You don't want to take the risk on unproven players. Ben Waine probably would need time to settle in. He's just not as good as the other strikers that they've got right now. He needs to be playing in English football and developing his game a little bit more, mostly getting accustomed to the physicality and stuff like that, which I think he's doing so, but there's only so much that you can gather from the training pitch. And if he's only going to be playing, like last season, he was around the first team the whole time with Plymouth, but he was playing 5 to 10 minutes off the bench most weeks, some weeks not at all. Like it's just not enough to be able to take his game to the next level the way he needs to. So dropping down a division, it's only down 1 division. He's gone from Championship to League One to Mansfield Town, who just got promoted from League Two to League One. So they won't have any high ambitions. They're not going to, they'll just be hoping not to get relegated. But they've had a good solid start to the new season. They also sold their top scorer from last season and have loaned out one of their other main strikers. So they've rebuilt their striking core. So unlike Waine sitting behind, I think it's Ryan Hardy is the main striker there, and they've got a Tajani, something like that, an off-season signing. And then they signed another forward towards the end of the deadline day. So there's a few guys who are they've spent money on or they've just were already there established ahead of Ben Waine that he would have had to break down the hierarchy there. Ben Waine's at Mansfield Town, walking into a fairly rebuilt, fresh situation. Sounds like Darren Baisley gave him a good reference, which helped with matters. And yeah, League One feels like a good level for him. It's the same level that Matt Dibley-Diaz has gone to get his match experience to try break into a Premier League club. So if it's good enough for a Premier League club, it's good enough for a Championship club. It's quite a nice move for him. And he immediately, despite the fact that he missed after they signed their other striker, the third striker, he immediately disappeared from the next 2 matchday squads. Him and one other guy, Saxon Early, I think his name is, another sort of fringe Plymouth player. I think he's a fullback or something. These 2 both disappeared after new signings came in. Wayne Rooney asked about it. I know this guy's got a little bit of a head knock, and Ben Waine was just feeling his groin or something like that, or whatever. They're injured. That's why they didn't play. Well, then a couple of days later, both of those 2 guys got loaned out on deadline day, and then Ben Waine not only got loaned out, but he got loaned out in time to be registered to play the next day for 10 minutes off the bench or something like that, just to sort of like get accustomed to the new team, have a look at run around slightly. But clearly clearly he wasn't injured. That was just the fact that are these two guys that no, they're injured. They're just that's all it is. And then you sell them. Well, actually, you're just keeping them out of the thing. Unlike Nando Pijnaker, who was injured, he did have a head knock. He missed the last couple of games. He could have played for Sligo Rovers, but he confirmed himself he had bumped his head and sat out a couple of games precautionarily, and then he was sold. But yeah, I like this move for Ben Waine. I think this is the key thing for him, though, of course, like all these deals, is what happens next. And he's just got to score some goals. If he scores some goals, that's the ultimate currency. But he's at an age where, like, Chris Wood was like 26 when he had his breakthrough season with Leeds United, where it was the championship golden boot, and that led to a move to Burnley and blah, blah, blah. Again, rest is history. Ben Waine's like 22, and Chris Wood had been over in England since he was 17 or 18. Like he had a earlier start than Waine, and he still had that long lead up. So Waine's got plenty of time on his side. It's just a matter of go score some goals for Mansfield Town, and the world will be your oyster.
We will touch on Auckland FC soon, because you seem to think old mate Nando Pijnaker is going to Auckland FC. I don't think I've seen anything official just yet, but we know that
the Herald are reporting it. There was a report as well. Like, this weird thing about how this stuff works is there was a bit on the Herald being like the Herald can exclusively confirm that blah blah blah, but you're not exclusively. I think it reveal in this occasion. I don't know if they use the word exclusive or not, but the Herald can reveal that Nando Pijnaker will be signing with Auckland FC. It's like, well, 24 hours ago, the Irish media already said this, so you're not really revealing anything. It's just this weird little thing with the news hounds to have to be the ones to break the news as opposed to just saying what the facts are. But that is happening.
I haven't seen anything official, so it's not official yet. But we do know that Alex Paulson, that his loan from Brentford or Bournemouth?
Bournemouth, yeah.
Bournemouth. So his loan from Bournemouth to Auckland FC is all good. And you seem to think, you like dropped it subtly last week because we were reacting to the All White squad. You dropped that Max Crocombe is likely to be the number one goalkeeper for the All Whites, or he is the number one goalkeeper for the All Whites, in your opinion. But I reckon that like Alex Paulson's way more trendy. Like a lot of casual Kiwi football fans or Kiwi football fans know a lot more about Alex Paulson thanks to being front and center with the Wellington Phoenix than they do about Max Crocombe. So we can pivot into Auckland FC on the back of the Paulson stuff. But you did find a nice little clip here of Max Crocombe making a spectacular save in stoppage time to seal a draw. And he's playing for Burton Albion, I believe. So for folks who are like, I know who Alex Paulson is. He's really good at being a goalkeeper in football. He should be the starting goalkeeper for the All Whites. What's your background and context about Max Crocombe that makes you believe that he is the number one goalkeeper for the All Whites?
Well, the Oceania Nations Cup a couple months ago more or less confirmed this, where they both went and Paulson played one game, and it was his first game for the All Whites, but Crocombe played all the other games. And Darren Baisley just seems to have, I don't know, like, I think Crocombe's made 6 of the last 9 starts. It just Baisley likes him, and he's certainly a more experienced goalkeeper than Alex Paulson. He is probably the safer pick right now, but Paulson clearly has all the potential in the world. The move to Auckland FC stunts him a little bit, partly because it's a new start for him, partly because it's not quite the jump, like it's just kind of a sideways move from Phoenix to Auckland. It's not quite the step up that might have driven a bit more competition with Crocombe, but also just in fairness, like Crocombe was the incumbent. Paulson had a brilliant A-League season. He'll probably have another brilliant A-League season. He is, for this current tour, he did play at the Olympics, so he's not completely out of game time. But those are the only games he's played since since that one in the Nations Cup, really. Whereas Max Crocombe is now a month into his new season and has already had a battle on his hands. They dropped him as the reigning player of the year at Burton Albion. He then within one game had won his position back. He's been starting since then. And he's just been making big saves and playing really, really well for Burton Albion, following on from what he did last season, making big saves, playing really, really well for Burton Albion. He's nowhere near the passer that Alex Paulson is, but he's got a big frame. He's a great leader, very vocal. He will make those crucial saves. He's just a good, sturdy goalkeeper, and he is the incumbent, and he is in match form right now with match fitness, So I could see a situation where Crocombe starts the first game, Paulson starts the second game. That would be interesting, because I think if that happens, that tells you that Baisley is open-minded to Paulson overtaking Crocombe sooner than potentially otherwise expected, because that's happening at some point. Alex Paulson's really good. It's not just him. Like Case Sims or Henry Gray and some of these other guys, they will overtake Max Crocombe as well. Max Crocombe's playing League One football. It's not the Premier League. He's a very good, solid goalkeeper, but he's not at the level where it's like undeniable. You have to pick this guy because he's playing at such a degree. He's not there. So some of these young talented goalkeepers, and there are so many of them coming out of this country at the moment, these guys will overtake him. It's just a matter of when. So Crocombe right now has earned that spot. He's earned those gloves, and I think will probably continue through for the next wee while at least. At least right where we are right now, Crocombe has established himself ahead, and Paulson just hasn't quite caught up to him. But that day will come.
I think like a lot of the Paulson stuff also depends. Like the All Whites just can't suddenly start playing 100% out from the back if the team isn't designed or prepared for that. And I think a club team like the Wellington Phoenix or Auckland FC, if they are preparing with Paulson as the goalkeeper for a full season, you can build the system around Paulson's skill set. Whereas like international footy, everyone needs to be tapped in with Alex Paulson's fantastic passing ability. And it seems like something that needs to be embedded over time for a team that gets together once or twice a year. So, but as you said, Aotearoa has fantastic depth. I was also thinking, like, Auckland FC aren't paying Wellington Phoenix for Alex Paulson. But in theory, the same ownership group just paid a massive transfer fee to get Paulson to Bournemouth. So in a roundabout way, Auckland FC have just, forked out cash for Alex Paulson. So there's like still, because you can think, well, this is pretty shitty for the Wellington Phoenix. Like, they just lost their goalkeeper to the new Auckland A-League team. It's like, well, that happened. True, but the Wellington Phoenix development system is awesome. So there's another goalkeeper from Aotearoa ready to step up. And they made a lot of money from it to fund that development system. With
the amount of money that probably pays for their entire operations for the next season. It's probably all covered by the Alex Paulson sale. And they also sold Finn Sermon, Ben Old, and let's not forget Macy Fraser as well from that club. So I think they did all right out of the deal. They're not like innocent victims in the matter. They got something pretty valuable in return.
I was thinking about this and weaving this into the Breakers stuff, and I kind of did because is Auckland FC signing too many Kiwis now that they've got the addition of Nando Pijnaker unofficially, and this
who they did pay a fee for, by the way. They paid an actual transfer fee for him. He only had like 3 months left on his contract, so I don't think we're talking Paulson money there, but they did pay for him. They stumped up some cash. They wrote a check,
and that. Got to be careful saying this, but are the Wellington Phoenix signing too many Japanese players? Because they've just signed 2.
Well, Auckland FC got one too.
But the Wellington Phoenix got 2 in the last few weeks, right?
Yep, so they have signed multiple Japanese. I've got to have.
Yeah, so all of that is just like
the names while
all of that's just me having a giggle. Like, it's obviously not true because we want Auckland FC to have as many Kiwis as possible for that connection to community, and also Wellington Phoenix. They're just trying to, like, from an uneducated perspective, they're just trying to sign dudes who can roll through any kind of midfieldy position with some attacking flair, which to me seems kind of similar to the Warriors. You got a lot of forwards, whether it's Leka Halasima, Dimitri Sifakula, Jackson forward, Marata Neokori. Like they can play edge middle. Mitchell Barnett. They can all play edge or middle. And the man behind me, Lavinia Tauhalaliku, can genuinely play any backline position. So it seems like the Wellington Phoenix, they're under Chiefy. He's refreshing his attacking system with players that he really wants who can cover multiple positions. Because like sometimes when you're pressing or you've got the footy, you're going to find yourself out on the right side of the field. And if you're a pigeonholed left side of the field, but you're playing in that system and you end up on the right side of the field, you might not know what you're doing. But if you've got the skill set and the versatility, you can play just as well on the right side as you can on the left side, as you can in the middle, as you can holding midfielder, as you can maybe a second striker. So to me, there's quite two big themes there with Auckland FC and the Wellington Phoenix. The Wellington Phoenix, they're signing a lot of Japanese players, but they're signing a lot of players who can cover multiple positions at a high level. And they're all mature. Aside from the youngster from up north, they're all mature lads, so they are comfortable with the weekly grind and being able to roll through those positions. Auckland FC, credit to them, they are going above and beyond to sign Kiwi footballers. As you said, they paid a transfer fee for young Nando. That's just an awesome sign for a new franchise in the A-League on the back of this Wellington Phoenix success last season. What do you make of those two kind of overarching themes with the recent news coming out of Wellington Phoenix and Auckland FC?
Yeah, the Phoenix stuff is fascinating right now because we have last season to compare it to. And last season's version of the Phoenix was the most successful version of the Phoenix we've ever seen, but it was a defensively sound team. It was the best defense in the A-League. They conceded the fewest goals. They just had fantastic, underlying numbers. They had the best goalkeeper. They had defenders, centre-backs just making clearances, blocking shots, doing all them good things. They allowed a lot of shots, and yet they conceded so few goals. Like they forced opponents into lower percentage opportunities and then did just enough going forward. They've lost Alex Paulson. They've lost Finn Sermon. They've also lost Ben Old, who wasn't a defensive player, but was one of their very important transitional players. So growing from defense into attack, he was one of the guys who linked that up with his drop deep, collect the ball, dribble it forward. That's a lot to have to rebuild around. And they have... I mean, I suspected this anyway, but I think it's now pretty abundantly clear from the quotes that Chiefy's been throwing out there is he doesn't expect this team to be able to necessarily just repeat the formula from last season. He doesn't necessarily, well, at least he's not putting his eggs in the basket of saying, well, we'll just get a goalkeeper as good as Paulson, a centre-back as good as Sermon, and someone who can dribble like Old, and then just do that again. In order for this team to stay at the level they want to be at, they're trying to find more balance so that it's like, well, maybe we can't be as good defensively as we were last season, but we can certainly be a lot better on attack, and maybe that can be a net gain in the long run. So yeah, I think this is fascinating because the players that they're signing, like Mako Rojas, they've signed him, extended Costa Barbarouses, but obviously he was already there. Paulo Retre, Luke Brooks-Smith, Josh Oluwayemi, the new goalkeeper, Dublin Boone is a scholarship goalkeeper, but Kazuki Nagasawa and Hideki Ishige as well, the two Japanese players. Yeah, very versatile. All these guys can play multiple positions, Retre, Rojas included. I hadn't thought about it, that other point that you mentioned, but you're right. They are both, like, Rojas is 32, Retre is 31, Nagasawa 31, Ishige 29. Oluwayemi is 23 and Luke Brooks-Smith is 16, so slight difference there. And Dublin Boone's 19; he's a scholarship player, but so is Brooks-Smith actually. But yeah, those are also experienced players who can play, not just play in multiple positions, but also probably can play through multiple situations because they've been there at high levels. They know what it takes when you're 1-0 down away from home, or they know how to hold a lead when you're 2-1 up at home with 5 minutes to go against a good team on attack, kind of thing. Or like players who'll be able to just roll with whatever the situation requires. And like, we'll think about one of the trends we saw from them last season was how sometimes their fullbacks would slot inside, or one of their midfielders would slot outside, and you sort of get into a bit of a back three type shape, or like Ben Old playing as almost like a wing back, or Sam Sutton as an inverted fullback. Well, Sam Sutton can be an inverted fullback because Sam Sutton has a midfield background. So he can play in the midfield anyway. So obviously he's fine slipping into it, that kind of position. Someone like Nagasawa, for example, is a holding midfielder, but he can play all over the place. So if he needs to drop into the defense to pick up the ball, he knows what that requires. If he needs to slide out wide to fullback to get in the ball to allow someone like Tim Payne. Again, Tim Payne's played every position in the book except goalkeeper. Like literally, he's played every position in them. There was a under 17 World Cup that he went to. I think he was still a striker back in those days. Now he's a fullback. Funny story about that is he actually played against Hideki Ashige, who scored the Japan knocked New Zealand out in the first round of the knockouts, won 6-0. Ashige got 2 goals and set up another one. So he had a bit of a blinder, and Tim Payne was on the opposite team. And now they're teammates, although they wouldn't have gone head to head because, yeah, Tim Payne would have been playing as an attacking midfielder or a striker. Now he's a centre back, or now pretty emphatically now as a right back. So versatility throughout the place. Even Alex Rufer. Like Alex Rufer seems like, without meaning this in a harsh way, he seems like the stodgiest player in the team, like the guy who has the strictest role kind of in that squad. But Alex Rufer, when he was playing under 20s, he was a striker as well. He's played as an attacking midfielder. He's steadily moved further back to become a defensive midfielder, which is clearly his best position. But even him, he's someone who's played other areas. Like there's a lot of versatility in this team, and that suggests to me Chiefy wants a fluid setup. He wants players who can drift into different positions and not necessarily stick into your emphatic shape. Don't really know whether we'll get that kind of, like, don't know what to expect from Auckland FC. I suppose we could look at some Steve Corica past stuff to get some ideas of that, but they are ultimately a blank slate, so we will have to wait and see. They were playing sort of like a 4-2-3-1 shape. I think they're looking at their team, probably need another import forward, definitely need I would say, an import midfielder. I think with Nando Pijnaker probably brings us to the end of their local signings. I just don't know whether you've still got 4 more open import spots at the moment. I don't know that there's really any more room for anyone else on top of that. Otherwise, your scholarship guys weren't worth signing because they're just never going to get to play if that's the case. Whereas the Phoenix, I think both teams are at 22 players, but the Auckland FC have signed a few extra scholarship guys. So the Phoenix, they might not be done, but whatever they've got left, I expect, because they've filled out their import spots. I did see a cheeky rumor that maybe David Ball might not be back though. He did go an entire season without scoring a goal last year, so if that's performance related, I think that would be understandable, even though Bally does offer a lot to the team in an experienced leadership kind of manner. But I think anything else the Phoenix do, unless something happens there with Ball, anything else the Phoenix do will just be upgrading scholarship players or, from their own academy. Whereas Auckland FC, I think probably they're done with scholarship and academy play and local players in general, but they do have a few import spots which they will need to fill. And when those start flying in, then we'll get an idea of where the team are at and sort of what they're going to look like.
The good thing about the Wellington Phoenix system is that all the youngsters coming through that system will be well versed in the style that Chiefy is trying to play. So he's trying to sign players who can do multiple roles, but then he's got this long list of youngsters who are already entrenched in how Chiefy wants to play and should be able to fill those roles off the bench throughout the season and in the coming years as well. Let's get into a bit of rugby league. We'll chat a little bit of rugby league, a little bit of cricket as we finish our podcast. Definitely went heavy on the football this week, but we do have some rugby league to chat because the Warriors defeated the Cronulla Sharks, and that was nice. Everyone finished on a lovely note, little celebrations. And I've got the Warriors crowds here at Mount Smart. The 2020 2023 average was 18,800. The 2024 average was 22,800. So there's a big increase there, and those are big crowds. Like throughout the season, every crowd except for one, I believe. Yes. Yeah, oh, every crowd was over 23,000 except for one. The Broncos game was 22,700. So like part of me is like, yeah, the Warriors stepped up to finish the season on a high. It's like, well, you had some big games at Mount Smart that you couldn't step up for, you know? Like it's a bit weird. Like they've been getting big crowds at Mount Smart all season, as we talked about earlier in the podcast, and it would have been nice if they just stepped up for that Anzac Day game against the Titans. That would have been a great occasion. They had a draw against the Seagulls at Mount Smart. Let me roll through here. They lost to the Storm at Mount Smart. They lost to the Eels, then they lost to the Bulldogs at Mount Smart. And of course, the Bulldogs game, whoopsie daisy, the Bulldogs game was Sean Johnson's last game at Mount Smart. So somehow they stepped up for this game to finish the season on a high, but they couldn't step up for games in front of big crowds at Mount Smart Stadium. So it's just an awkward vibe. That's the season for the Warriors, and all season long we have talked that the best Warriors performances have come with strong contributions from younger players from second tier Warriors. The best wins of the season against the Panthers, against the Dolphins. They were both they both had core groups of second tier Warriors playing at a high level. And that was on show to a lesser extent against the Sharks, because we had Taine Tuaupiki playing at a high level, and we had Ali Leotawa playing at a high level as well. I did write about Ali Leotawa this morning, Kiwi-NRL Spotlight, and he's got a 50% win rate or higher in his 2 seasons of NRL and 2 seasons in New South Wales Cup. Pretty sure Taine Tuaupiki has the same thing. Let me pull this up. I did drop all those Taine Tuaupiki stats in the news there. I'm not sure if I had the win percentages. Let me double check. Taine Tuaupiki, New South Wales Cup, 64% winning. Last year, 64% winning this season. NRL, 5 games, 60% winning last year. 6 games, 50% winning this year. So aside from Dimitri Sifakula, who I think this was his first win in the NRL, despite being a fantastic young forward for the Warriors, like whether it was Paul Roach stepping up for a game against the Panthers, you know, Moala Graham-Talfa mid-season had a couple of wins. The best element of this season for the Warriors was the young players, and we all want to see these youngsters play more footy, but I do think the Warriors are in alignment with some sort of plan to drip feed the youngsters into the NRL. Like Taine Tuaupiki played 5 games last year, he's played 6 games this season. Ali Leotawa played 1 game last season, now he's played 6 games this season. Sifakula played 4 games in a row. We had Zion Maiu make his debut. Jacob Laban made his debut this season. Leka Halasima made his debut. So you got 3 dudes right there who made their debuts this season. Moala Graham-Talfa got a little taster as well. I keep thinking, like, if the Warriors just came out and said, we got a 3-year plan. Because Phil Gould, he's the mastermind of the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan, which means he's got a job for 5 years, he's got a job for 10 years. The Warriors didn't announce any plans. They went the opposite way, and Andrew Webster, it came out later on that Andrew Webster had said, I want to work with the players that we have here at the Warriors. And that led to instant success last season. So suddenly the Warriors themselves blew up the expectations based on last year, where I think if you ask Andrew McFadden, he might be, by year 3, we're going to be a team with a lot of local juniors playing NRL, and we're going to build towards that peak. And I think they're on track for that plan. When you look at how the youngsters have performed this season and the second tier players, because Paul Roach isn't necessarily a youngster, but you look at how those players have been integrated into the NRL, how they have performed in the NRL, how they have performed in New South Wales Cup, because the New South Wales Cup team are playing finals footy for the second year in a row, despite having two different coaches. Like, they're a good team, and they are a good team with all these youngsters playing a lot of footy in New South Wales Cup for 2 years in a row now. I think that is just part of a plan that might not exist. Just a plan I've created, and I might be putting it on the two Andys, Andrew McFadden and Andrew Webster. But I can see how they are building towards that, and I think the performances of the youngsters this year has been a notable wrinkle, because the best Warriors games, the best Warriors wins, featured strong contributions from those second tier players. There's a couple of things in the NRL that I think put into context what the Warriors are doing. And again, I'm just going to double check this on the fly. So you're like, the Warriors, they're pretty cool. Okay, they didn't make the finals this year. And it's not like smooth sailing at the moment. We've talked about some Warriors issues. We've talked about some bad vibes. But hey, sip some gratitude, because the Warriors aren't the Tigers. The Tigers, they are last in the NRL heading into the wooden spoon battle against the Eels. They're both on 18 points, but the Tigers are last via points differential. Let me check in the NRLW, where the Tigers are last. The Tigers are 0-6 in the NRLW. So the Tigers right now, they are last in the NRL, and they are last in NRLW. Let me check the New South Wales Cup ladder.
Don't tell me it gets worse.
We've got the Western Suburbs Magpies. So if you've seen the NRL news, there's no Balmain New South Wales Cup team. It's a Western Suburbs New South Wales Cup team. So if you've been following the Tigers news, this is some of the nitty gritty. And the Western Suburbs Magpies, they are last in New South Wales Cup. So let me finish this. So the Women's Premiership. Hey, that's the Wentworthville Magpies. They're the Magpies. New South Wales Cup Tigers team, they're called the Magpies as well. There's a lot of Magpies. There's a lot of Seagulls when you go into the NRL affiliated team list. But Wentworthville, I believe, is actually affiliated with the Eels. And they might be first. No, the Eels have their own New South Wales Cup team. So I'm not sure who the Wentworthville Magpies are. Let me check, because they might be affiliated with the Tigers, and they might be first. So shout out to them. I'm not sure if they are, but there's, hey, well, what's that? That's an actual West Tigers women's team in the New South Wales Women's Premiership, who are second to last.
So improving on the rest of the club.
Yeah. So, again, I'm not too over the nitty gritty of the Wentworthville Magpies, who may be affiliated with West Tigers, but there's 3 teams named West Tigers who are either last or second to last, and then there's another team, Western Suburbs, who are affiliated with the Tigers. They're last in New South Wales Cup. And if we go New South Wales Cup, Warriors are 4th this year. Maybe the Tigers were pretty good last year in New South Wales Cup. They were 11th out of 13th. So the Warriors aren't the Tigers. Not only are they better than the Tigers as far as football goes, fair play, the Warriors don't have a women's team right now, but they also don't have that merger bickering. And as we've talked about before, like all the Warriors sponsors, they are national brands. You get into these Sydney clubs and you're dealing with a lot of like local neighborhood brands sponsoring. So business-wise, the Warriors are not the Tigers. Structure-wise, the Warriors are not the Tigers. Performance-wise, the Warriors are not the Tigers. So shout out to the Warriors. You are not the Tigers. Also, some context around how the Warriors have performed this season. Last year, the Broncos made the grand final against the Panthers, and the Warriors finished third. The Knights finished fifth. The Raiders finished seventh. Well, no, let me skip through a round. So the Broncos finished second, Warriors were fourth, Knights fifth, Raiders eighth. And as we know, the Broncos made the grand final, and the Warriors defeated the Knights, then lost to the Broncos in that finals campaign. If we fast forward to this year, the Knights are 9th, the Raiders are 11th, the Broncos are 12th, and the Warriors are 13th. So the Warriors, they're in a tier above the Tigers. Shout out to the Warriors. They're a tier above the Tigers as an organization. And in that tier are 3 other teams who made the finals last year who are not in finals footy ahead of the final round. The Warriors are only 1 win behind the Broncos, and the Broncos made the grand final last year.
Beating the Warriors along the way.
Exactly. So that puts into context, like, yeah, this season sucked for the Warriors, but I've just said that the best performances featured a lot of youngsters, many of whom are going to take on greater roles next season. And you're also signing Fisher Harris. But then you're not alone in dropping out of the finals from last season. The Knights have a good chance. The Raiders and the Knights have a decent chance of getting into finals footy, so shout out to them. But if we compare the Warriors to the Broncos, the Warriors' vibe right now is far better than the Broncos. Like, the Warriors finished on a high. Who are the Broncos playing this week? They're playing the Melbourne Storm. Suncorp Stadium on Thursday night. The Storm could do anything. Like, they could rest a whole bunch of players and they could beat the Broncos with their second-tier team. Because they got superstars like Alec McDonald from Aotearoa, Joe Chan, Jack Howarth, New Zealand A players, and so on. And if the Broncos lose to that Melbourne Storm team, like, the vibe right now, the Warriors have a far better vibe right now. Because the Broncos just got rolled by the Dolphins. If they beat the Storm, then I might say it's even. But if the Storm beat the Broncos to finish the season, then the Warriors finish below the Broncos, but I reckon the vibe is far better. And that just puts into context, like, the whole Warriors season. There's a lot of good young talent coming through, many of whom now have plenty of experience in the NRL. They've signed Fish Harris for next season. They might sign Aaron Clark for next season. Better than the Tigers as an organization, and they are not alone. There's 3 other teams right now from last year's finals mix who aren't in the finals right now. So I think that's a good summary of where the Warriors are at. Like, sure, this is a disappointing year, but in the context of how other teams are performing, it doesn't seem as bad as it is, although the performances at Mount Smart in front of big crowds, in front of a lot of fans who have shown up week in, week out, this must be the best season for Warriors attendance ever. And somehow the Warriors decided to stink it up at Mount Smart. So that's there's a lot of, I was talking last week about balancing the reality with some hope and optimism. This is just a continuation of that, where you just got to balance all these matters together, and it kind of feels like a stinker of a season. The Mount Smart thing's disappointing, but there's other teams, especially the Broncos, who they're dropping, diminishing, decreasing performance seems and feels far more dramatic than the Warriors. Like, there's more drama with the Broncos if they suck. So it's kind of good, kind of bad. And that's just where the Warriors are at right now. But again, heading into next season, I think there's a lot of strong foundations to build upon.
Yeah, I'm just looking through what's their actual uh this is why it's tricky because I was looking through to see what their home like the actual wins and losses figure is for their home stuff, but then the home stuff includes a game in Christchurch, I think it was at the start of the season, which they won. So that's boosting their home record, which isn't a Mount Smart game. And then I don't know if it includes they seem to have been technically the home team for Magic Round as well, even though that's obviously a neutral ground. I don't know if that's included in that, so it's a
Yeah,
little
so
bit.
if we take out those two things, they are 4-5 because those were
Yeah,
two
because they
wins,
won. They beat the Panthers in Magic Round, so
and they won in
their two best
Christchurch.
home wins weren't at Mount Smart.
So they've got yeah, their best home wins were not at Mount Smart, but they're 6-5 at home. So you take out the two wins in that you're talking about, they're 4-5. So 4-5 at Mount Smart off the top of the head. That's not great. And it's not great when you're 3-9 in Australia.
Yeah, add those things together, and you just have a team that's maybe not that great, which tracks with what we saw from the Warriors. But the weird thing about them is that in typical Warriors fashion, there was like this wasn't just a steadily average team. They beat the Panthers in one game. Their reserves turned up and beat the Dolphins, who are looking now like they might be a top eight side after all. They've had like games where there's so many single try defeats and a draw as well in there with like just one more try or just one fewer try conceded and the result of that game changes. So many close losses. They've also had stirring comebacks and they've had games where they started really well and then just capitulate. They had one of, if not their biggest ever defeats to a Titans team that wasn't even playing that well at that time, although they've been better since then. They've also had there's games where their senior players who were so good for them last season have just really struggled, and that Sean Johnson losing streak was a part of that. There's games where the guys backing them up have been really good, some in a couple occasions spectacular, and like that might actually be quite a positive thing moving forward for the reasons you're just saying there. Is like, well, if some of those older guys are getting older and a couple of them are leaving, and you have guys who are now getting towards being established NRL players, we're starting to get the taste for victory. There's those guys are only going to get better, and this yeah, it's such a strange season. It's such a weird season with these big extremes, but I like the 3-year plan idea. Even if it's whether it's real or not, I still like the 3-year plan. I think anytime a new coach comes in to try and not just carry on what was before them, but actually like change things and reset the club to some extent, or at least just coming in to try set a distinct new era in a team. I think 3 years is a good judgment for that. I mean, if you sack a guy within that, either things have to be absolutely terrible to where it's like, oh, this was a mistake, this wasn't going to work, or you have to give them at least 3 years and say, well, let's look what it's like at the end of that. Webster's first year, fantastic. Second year, pretty average, like bad if you compare it to what he had done in year one. But yeah, I still think that third year is the decisive one. I sort of feel like this is a withhold judgment situation. And if you have one fantastic year and then two pretty bad ones, well, then you think, well, yeah, it's something. It doesn't necessarily have to be a coaching change, but something needs to be fixed here because this direction isn't working. But if you have a really good year and then a bit of a sophomore slump, but then you bounce back in the third year, having learnt the lessons of the second season, having brought through young players steadily throughout those 3 years to where they're ready for their NRL team at the end of that, and you have quite a good year, well, then everything is on the right track. Then it doesn't matter that the second season was a slump because the second season still helps you get to that point. And that remains to be seen with this Warriors team. But there's plenty of positives. There's plenty of stuff to take from what we saw this season. That's one of the things about having those extremes is that, well, at least you can see that the team is capable of better. And next season, maybe they will serve up better. At the very least, having James Fisher Harris turning up is probably a good. That's the arrow pointing in the right direction, at least to start with.
The 3-year plan, I think it's less about NRL performance and it's more about building a roster. And there's like a lot of people, like it's kind of been a situational season. We've talked about it. Like I've said all season long, the youngsters are playing better footy than the NRL team. But these two dudes, Webster, McFadden, as I've said, they were at the Warriors before. They saw how junior players had their careers and their contributions to the NRL ravaged by promoting them when they weren't ready. So I can talk up the youngsters all I want, but I think they are wise to drip feed these young players into the team all season, over the course of 2 seasons now. Meanwhile, the team they play for otherwise wins. They are a good New South Wales Cup team. So you're not losing anything by them playing a lot of consistent New South Wales Cup footy. But the 3-year plan idea is that by year 3, the guys who have been drip fed into the NRL across year 1 and year 2, now they are playing a lot of top 17 footy. And to do that, you need to shuffle some dudes out. So over the course of this period, we've seen Josh Curran, Bailey Sirinen. They left from last year. Ronald Volkman left from last year. Now we got Whenua Blake, maybe Bunty Afoa, Jazz Tavanga. There was some whispers about Dylan Walker, but we won't include him in this mix. That's 6 dudes right there who have been shuffled out of the Warriors NRL squad, and most of those spots will be taken by the local juniors. But you can't do that year 1. You can't just say, big dog, I'm Andrew Webster and I'm Andrew McFadden. We're the 2 Andys. We don't want you here. See you later. No, they came in and they were like, we're going to work with what we have and we're going to build towards a sustainable future. Over the course of these 2 years, you have seen them shuffle some dudes out. And those dudes are going there. They are making way for the youngsters. So I think the way they've done it might not necessarily have been conducive with winning footy this year, because I think the older players were bad this year. They didn't win. So usually selecting a whole lot of youngsters isn't conducive with winning, but in this instance, I think it might have been more useful to the Warriors. But if we're operating from this 3-year plan idea, then you can say, okay, let's just stay patient with our youngsters. Let's make sure they're ready for week-to-week NRL footy, and let's build towards that, because all these youngsters, Leotawa, Laban, Halasima, Sifakula, Graham Telfer, Zion Maiu, Kailani Going, not a youngster. Paul Roach, not a youngster, but they can contribute. Eddie Iramia, Makaya Tafua, Sio Kelly, Motu Pasikala, all these dudes now have 2, 3 NRL preseasons under their belts. And I think the NRL preseason is a key factor, because that's when you do all your training, your NRL quality fitness and strength training. So yeah, that's my overarching ideas about the Warriors. And another thing I was thinking about, let's test you here. What's a physical trait that I've talked about the Warriors lacking this season? It actually goes back to what we were talking about before.
Yeah, I wanted to say mobility, but I know that you actually mean speed.
I mean speed. And I mean
and not
speed.
Just leg speed.
Not just leg speed. I mean actual speed. Team against the Sharks. You got Tane Tuapiki, he's got plenty of zip. You got Luke Metcalf, who's pretty quick. So you can see how bad Warriors teams this year, there was no speed. They were slow. But if you insert 2 players, now you've got 2 fast players. I think Moala Graham Telfer's fast. So he's another one I think who can add speed to the NRL team. And the one player I reckon you hear leg speed the most when talked about, is Aaron Clark. He's all leg speed. Reality is he's just a fast middle forward, but he's got great leg speed. So if Aaron Clark comes to the Warriors next season, and the Warriors play with Taine Tuapiki at fullback, Luke Metcalf in the halves, Aaron Clark in the 17, and maybe some games you have Graham Telfer. Well, then you've got 4 dudes who are fast for their positions who weren't necessarily top 17 players this season. So you're going from a slow team to a team with speed. And I think that's going to be a key wrinkle going into next season if they do sign Aaron Clark, because speed helps you win games in the NRL if you're doing all the other things well. Because the Titans are super fast with Aaron Clark, Lofiana Khan Pereira, so on, Keanu Kinney. But they don't have a lot of the things that the Warriors have already shown, mainly last year. There was a Brandon Smith to get injured and the Roosters lost to the Raiders. So he was like, the New Zealand Kiwis could have rolled with a dummy half duo of Brandon Smith, Jeremy Marshall-King. But if Brandon Smith's injured, and hopefully Jeremy Marshall-King's healthy because he's pretty good dummy half. We saw Kieran Foran plug a hole at dummy half last year, so he could do that. Aaron Clark could be a good bench utility because he can just play as a middle forward while also offering some dummy half cover off the bench. Then you're getting into like Phoenix Crossland territory, who he was in the mix for the Kiwis last year despite kind of being Australian. But he was out injured last year, so that's why they had to go to Kieran Foran, Manu Brown. As long as you've got one of Brandon Smith or Jeremy Marshall-King, I think you're going to be fine. Like, they are 2 high-quality hookers, and I think that's going to... But that's another little pocket. Like, the centre pocket is still a big one. And then you've got that dummy half rotation to watch out for. Tauhalaliku, she made her debut for the Cowboys. Funnily enough, the Cowboys coach, Ricky Henry, is actually the Kiwi Ferns coach. And the Tauhalaliku, like I talked about Southern Cross, that connection, but she was playing for the Manly Sea Eagles. Manly Sea Eagles this year in the New South Wales Women's Premiership, they got like 5, 6, 7 players from Auckland mainly, just in a reserve grade Manly Sea Eagles team. Like, Manly Sea Eagles don't have an NRLW team, but they do have the New South Wales Women's Premiership team. So then Tauhalaliku was playing for that team. Then she got promoted. She earned a gig with the Cowboys. I imagine Ricky Henry knew about Tauhalaliku because she was playing rugby league and rugby union in Aotearoa in Auckland. She played a couple games for Counties Manukau in the Wharapama Cup, and she was like the best women's player in Auckland last year, I believe. So Ricky Henry would have known all about her. She's a Tongan international, and he snapped her up to play on the wing. She was named on the extended bench, and then she was put straight on the wing, and she looked comfortable. She's big, she's balanced, she's fast, she's a very good outside back. The unfortunate thing there was that she was playing against the Broncos. And the Broncos are an incredibly fun NRLW team. And they defeated the Cowboys. You got Meli Hafunga's awesome. Stacey Walker is very powerful and fast on the wing for the Broncos. Love what Stacey Walker's doing. And then you've got Gail Broughton is in the halves. She's fantastic in the halves. But then they had Tafito Lafaeli and Aneta Nu'uasala rolling through the middle. They're just 2 big boppers who dominated the middle of the field for the Broncos against the Cowboys. And unfortunately for Tauhalaliku and Harata Butler, who's a Tani Wharo Jr., unfortunately for them, the Broncos are just far too good and they are far too fun. So I do. It was an entertaining game, and Tauhalaliku was impressive in her debut. Like she made it look pretty easy, but the Broncos are just awesome. And if you're kind of floating around the NRLW, you got to dive into the Broncos. Like they're so fun. They got the Walker connection. Everyone loves a bit of Stacey Walker. Gail Broughton is someone to watch out for. I reckon she can play in the halves for the Kiwi Ferns. And then I wrote about Tafite Lafele last week. She's massive, and she just rolls through the middle. The Cronulla Sharks, they're 6-0. Anessa Biddle stays awesome. The Knights also had a win. Tanika Willison, another Sevens player, she was playing in the centres for the Knights. She shifted from wing to centre. So that's good stuff there for the Newcastle Knights. You got your Dragons? I was thinking about that. Like I don't know if you can say how the Warriors were playing for their coach all season, right? Because they were losing at Mount Smart. But if you look at who had big losses, like the Dragons had a big loss, and the Titans had a big loss.
Dragons had a big 4-point loss, but yeah, it was a big loss. Even though that sounds like an oxymoron, it's not. It was a big loss. It's actually ruined their whole season because that's going to cost them a top 8 spot.
It is interesting because now I'm thinking back, like the Titans and the Dragons weren't in my group of teams who I was comparing the Warriors with, but they've got like ridiculous losses. Like the Dragons are trying to crack the finals, and everyone's talking it up as a big game, and then they, have a bad first half. The Titans have like I don't know, they're kind of, I don't know if they actually had a chance of playing in the finals, but they were there or thereabouts. They're playing against the Knights, who are in this fringe top 8 mix, and they don't show up. So, like, again, the Warriors aren't necessarily alone in having these bad losses where your season's on the line and you just don't show up. So, again, that's another positive sign for the Warriors, but any Dragons thoughts for you?
Well, I didn't watch the game because I was at football and then we had a cup game, so it was a later kickoff, and that by the time I got home, the game was still on, the Dragons, but I'd been at the aftermatch checking my phone and being, oh, yeah, damn, 4-0 down already, 12-0, 12-4? Yeah, no, okay, 20-4, whatever. So it got ugly enough that I got home and I didn't even bother flicking the telly on. I was like, they've thrown away their entire season. I'm not going to watch this. So I didn't see the 5 tries in 10 minutes at the end that got them back within touching distance. Because it ultimately didn't matter because they blew it in the first half. But it did remind me, it's also probably why when the Warriors were down later on that night, I went to bed at halftime because I was tired and it was this is no better than last week, whatever, who cares? Then I missed a great comeback and whatever, so it goes. But I guess you could say 2 big comebacks in terms of scoring quick points in the second half. It's just that the Dragons dug themselves into such a hole that it was gone. Very depressing way for them to probably end this season. I think they play the Raiders next week, and the Knights play the Dolphins. So the winner of the Knights and Dolphins will finish 8th, but if that game is a draw, then the winner of the Dragons Raiders will overtake them and get 8th spot. So I don't know what the likelihood of a draw there is. Probably extremely, extremely, extremely slim, but there have been 1 or 2 draws this season, so it's not completely out of the question. But yeah, that was a bit shocking because the Eels were last and the Dragons just didn't show up for the biggest game of their season. Like, not sure. Considering that they've actually been all right this year because they usually turn up and put in at least a physical, half decent defensive performance, and here they just abandoned all of that. But That's the NRL for you. Unfortunately, when you're scrapping for eighth place, weird things can happen.
Nice little performance from the all Aotearoa halves combination. Dylan Brown from
Yeah.
Whangarei, Dejan Arce from Christchurch. And funnily enough, I voiced my frustrations with the Eels earlier in the season. We had a good outing from Makahisi Makatoa. So that was good to see. And we also got Ofahiki Ogden playing his first game of the season. So shout out to them. They haven't played a lot of footy this year, and funnily enough, the Eels have been pretty bad. So you get those two dudes in your forward pack and they have a good win. So shout out to Makahisi Makatoa. He's from New Plymouth, and Ofahiki Ogden is Mangari's junior. So more Kiwi-NRL Eels in that team, the better they go. Let's talk a little bit of cricket. We have the county tour lads are rocking and rolling. We got Brett Randall, Central District seamer. He's joining Somerset. Didn't play the last round, but he is playing the next round, I hope. He was signed, so you wouldn't sign an overseas player for them not to play. But we also had Fraser Sheet, Canterbury seamer. He's playing for Glamorgan. We got Michael Ray, Canterbury seamer. He's playing for Warwickshire. And Logan Van Beek. He is playing for Worcestershire. And he took 6 wickets in his first game. And that's the same Worcestershire team that Nathan Smith was playing for before he got his Blackcaps contract. I did see Wellington Cricket tweeted out on the back of this news that Nathan Smith and Josh Clarkson have Blackcaps contracts. It's Nathan Smith is a Blackcap. Not yet. He's got a Blackcaps.
He will be, but yeah,
He's got a Blackcaps contract. He's not necessarily a Blackcap.
That's a no ball for overstepping there.
Yeah. Nathan Smith in the Plunkett Shield, right? So if he took 33 wickets and an average of 17, what do you think his average is in the county championship this year with 27 wickets?
It won't quite be 17 because I don't remember him taking big hauls the way he did in a couple of those Wellington games, but it'll be solid 23, 24.
21.1. So his last Plunkett Shield campaign, he averaged 17 with the ball, 2.9 RPO. First season of county championship cricket, he's averaging 21 with an RPO of 3.1. So that's a good 12 months for Nathan Smith with the ball. I still think he probably needs to start the Plunkett Shield season on fire to really stamp his mark and demand Blackcap selection. I do think he will debut in ODIs and T20s to ease him into the Blackcaps group before because they've only got the 3 tests against England, so he could be an interesting backup seamer for one of those tests, like maybe the second or third test. Let's see what I don't think he's a bad white ball bowler. Yes, his best cricket's probably the long form cricket. And he does average 27 with the bat in first class cricket. List A cricket, he's got an average of 31.9, but then he's got a T20 bowling average of 23.4. Very good list A batting average, 26.4. And he's T20 cricket, he bats down the order, so he's got a lower average, 14.8, but he's got a career strike rate of 128.4, which is pretty healthy coming in down the order. So I do think he can add value to the Blackcaps in ODI and T20 cricket. But it's just his experience. He dominated the Plunkett Shield last summer. And now he's had a fantastic winter in the county championship cricket. In county championship cricket. And I do not think there is another Kiwi cricketer who has... It's not pressure because he's under no pressure to perform. Maybe just more intrigue about how he starts the Plunkett Shield. Because you imagine early season Plunkett Shield might be more seam-friendly conditions, a bit more rain around, overcasty, coming out of winter and spring. Those conditions might be perfect conditions for Nathan Smith to start the season. And again, I think if he dominates Plunket Shield cricket to start the summer, he will be one of the key lads to watch out for entering the Blackcaps this season.
Yeah, I like his career arc so much, like because he used to play for Otago, wasn't it? And he was a good, solid player. Then he moves franchises. Then he improves even further. Quite a few guys, I've heard you mention this. Like quite a few guys have gotten a little bit of a development boost by moving to Wellington as well. He's one of them. Maybe even one of the main ones right now. And then because he had a Plunket Shield that was good enough, which, if circumstances had broken right, he could have played Test cricket off the back of that. As it happens, a lot of good seam bowlers. Even at a time where they were experimenting with a few other different seam bowling options, like Will O'Rourke got a Test debut and Ben Sayers got a Test debut. Smith just found himself just a little bit too far down the line, or maybe just a little bit too, timing not quite right there. Then he went and backed up everything he did in the Plunket Shield by playing county cricket and continuing to play really well and gets a contract off the back of that. So I love that career arc. There's a guy who continually seems to just improve his game. And that is a nice trait to be bringing into the Blackcaps environment, because there's a few guys in that team who maybe it's not lack of talent, it's maybe just that they've plateaued a little bit in the last 12 months. And not saying that needs a shake up. It doesn't need a shake up in terms of personnel. It just needs guys to find a little bit more consistent form. But bringing in younger, hungrier guys is always a good spark for making that happen. And Nathan Smith has, continued to take positive strides forward in his career whenever he's been presented with opportunities. So you got to love that in the cricketer. You got to love that trait.
He is 26 years old right now, and he made his first-class debut in 2016. So it's like 8 years ago. I think he was 17 or 18 years old. Let's see who he was playing his debut with and against. Otago, that's when Michael Bracewell was still with Otago. Jimmy Neesham was still with Otago. They had Anaru Kitchen, Derek DeBorder, and I think he might have done some good stuff. Didn't score any runs, took a couple of wickets. Who did he get out? Dean Brownlee, Anton Devcich, Daryl Mitchell playing for Northern Districts. And that Northern Districts team had Daniel Flynn, Dean Brownlee, BJ Watling, Barrett Popley, Anton Devcich. Like that was 8 years ago. There is this group of cricketers coming through. So we've seen Dean Foxcroft play Blackcaps cricket. Tim Robinson has entered the Blackcaps. Aditya Ashok has played international cricket for New Zealand. Will O'Rourke, Ben Sayers made their Test debuts last summer, and Josh Clarkson also made his debut for the Blackcaps last summer. So you can see how this is add in Rachin Ravindra, add in Glenn Phillips. That's almost the team right there of new, again, a lot of these dudes, they played ODI cricket a few years ago. They played T20 cricket a few years ago. That's where you get the development plan idea from. So Ben Sayers has been on the Blackcaps T20 scene for random tours for a while. Now he's just entering the Blackcaps Test team. But if you look at how these players are being used under the new selection regime, Glenn Phillips coming into the Test team as an all-rounder, Rachin Ravindra batting number 4, Tim Robinson getting a crack, Josh Clarkson getting an opportunity, Will O'Rourke getting an opportunity, Ben Sayers getting an opportunity in Test cricket. this is a cluster of young players who are getting different opportunities across the formats, but also more prominent roles as opposed to just like here's a random T20 opportunity. The one dude I've been thinking about with regards to maybe playing Test cricket this summer is Ben Lister, who has a first class bowling average of 25.7. But I don't think he's in that contracted pool, which in theory would mean that Nathan Smith got a contract ahead of Ben Lister, which again may not mean anything. But if the Blackcaps do, like, I've got Ben Lister as the next best lefty. And he's kind of the only lefty to choose from. Like, you do have someone like Ray Toole in the circuit, but Ben Lister's already played cricket for New Zealand. He's got a fantastic domestic record. So he's someone I'd watch out for if the Blackcaps need a lefty in the Test series against England in Kiwi conditions this summer. But like guys like Henry Shipley, Ben Lister, they shouldn't be overlooked as contenders for selection. You would imagine that Nathan Smith getting his contract is just like a reward for everything he's done over the past 12 months. And the good thing about dudes dipping out of the contract is that the emerging cricketers get contracts so they can get into that full-on training system in the Blackcaps that, like what I was saying about an NRL preseason, if you do strength and conditioning training with the Blackcaps, you're going to get better. If you're doing the Blackcaps fielding training, you're going to get better. Although the Blackcaps have started to drop a lot of catches over the past few years, but the whole system, the Blackcaps training system, the skill system, sharing information, that does make players better. And like Ben Lister, Henry Shipley, they've already played cricket for New Zealand. And then you bring in someone like Nathan Smith and you give them the opportunity to be part of that training system. I think it's going to be highly beneficial. And thinking back to the T20 World Cup squad, I do feel like there was a lack of Blackcaps power hitting. That's where you're going to start to see Josh Clarkson become a factor, even in the ODI team, because he's a good all-rounder, but he is a power hitter. He's not like a pinch hitter up the top. Again, like the Warriors need some speed, they're going to get their speed next season, assuming they select Tane Tuapiki. Blackcaps need some power hitting. Tim Robinson's a power hitter up the top, pinch hitter, and then you've got someone like Josh Clarkson adding some oomph down the order.
Yeah, that's I'm just thinking about that. The sort of power hitters that the Blackcaps have at their disposal, because they have like Glenn Phillips is powerful. Glenn Phillips hits a huge six. Guys like Ravindra Conway, maybe not so much about power as it is about timing. They both can hit big sixes, but it's a little bit more about just like clean hitting. Finn Allen, depending on how much he plays now that he's ducked out of a contract and from a more vulnerable position than where Devon Conway was ducking out of his contract. A power hitter, but a power hitter in the way where like you see the machine working with him. Like it's you see him really swinging into the a lot of hand speed. And just really not a lot of foot speed though, not a lot of leg speed with Finn Allen. Doesn't really move the legs too much, but he swings those arms pretty quick. But you see him working for it, whereas Clarkson is powerful, and you see how powerful he is when he hits the ball, but also it feels a little effortless is the wrong word. It's not like it's effortless because you can see he's a big dude swinging a heavy bat and the ball goes a long way. But he feels like a big hitter in the way that like Jacob Oram used to be a big hitter. He's just like, it's just physical strength, being able to pummel a ball. Whereas Finn Allen is, and a lot of these other guys, it's like their power comes from timing, or their power comes from really just throwing everything into it. Whereas Clarkson can just crunch a cricket ball. And I don't know that they've had that type of hitting in the team for a little while. So maybe Michael Bracewell, I think, would apply to that. He actually has a bit of both. He's a bit of like clean timing and also just a massive bloke who can hit, like, doesn't skip out on the gym and he can smash a cricket ball. He can sort of do both of those things. But I mean, Michael Bracewell was injured for a little while there, and we saw that they did actually really quite miss him, particularly at the ODI World Cup. So there's always a need for that type of player, I think. Particularly if it's just someone you can, maybe not a first 11 player, you can just call them up. Like Nathan Smith's ability is a little more obvious in how that might fit into a Black Caps lineup. Clarkson maybe less so, but that is the type of player who actually is, yeah, very handy to have around because you can never hit too many sixes.
I just got a list of players, like notable players without contracts who I think will play a lot of Black Caps cricket over the next year or so. Tim Robinson, Ben Lister, Henry Shipley, Zach Folks, Mitch Hay, wicketkeeper. Right, that's the depth in New Zealand cricket where none of those dudes have Black Caps contracts, but all of those dudes can contribute to the Black Caps across multiple formats. And one last thought to just simmer away in your mind and the listener's mind. Like, what's if Tim Robinson gets an opportunity at the top of the order for the Black Caps and he just starts smashing boundaries everywhere? Fenelon's like, where does he sit? Like, okay, Lockie Ferguson, Adam Milne, they dipped out of the contracts, but what's if Will O'Rourke just snaps up lots of wickets? Suddenly Nathan Smith is a wicket taker for the Black Caps. Like, I can see a situation, yes, Fenelon's good at cricket, Lockie Ferguson's good at cricket, but if those dudes are overtaken in performances for the Black Caps, they won't be factors anymore. And that's their decision. And Eve, like, I don't know, what's if Devon Conway doesn't score many runs over the next couple of months for the Black Caps in Test cricket? And then some young batter or some emerging batter takes their opportunity. Then you're not a factor anymore. And that's the flip side of dipping out of your contract. Is I think it's more pertinent now where the Black Caps have a bit more depth and the talent of these emerging players is better. And it's like based on who these dudes are, like who Fenelon is, who Devon Conway is, who Lockie Ferguson is, you would assume that they would be losses for the Black Caps. But an alternative situation to ponder is that maybe the players who take their spots in the Black Caps teams perform better. Because remember, the Black Caps stunk up the T20 World Cup. They've had a dip in performance in Test cricket. They were solid at the ODI World Cup, making the semi-final. But I'm throwing it out there, like the next dudes up might take their opportunities, and then you're just lost into the oblivion.
And that's the risk, isn't it? When you step away from a contract, is you do leave the door open for someone else. If you're saying I'm not going to be available for every game, well then someone else comes in and plays those games you're unavailable for. They score more runs than you. If they take more wickets than you, they play more cricket than you. And that is earned. Like you've allowed that door to be left open. But if someone else comes in and plays better, you can't have any complaints about that. That's how it's supposed to work. That's the currency at play here. So that is an interesting little dynamic we've got going with this little flurry, I guess, of players who have. Because when you said here's a list of players without contracts, I'm thinking, okay, are you going to say Devon Conway, Kane Williamson, Fenelon, Lockie Ferguson, Adam Milne, etc., etc. I think Jimmy Neesham also doesn't have a contract. I wonder how. I do wonder where Jimmy Neesham, because he's probably one of those power hitters as well. Chuck him on that list, but I wonder where he sits now with Clarkson coming in. Sort of maybe that's a little bit of a changing of the guards moment as well, as someone who does, very similar type of player. Obviously, Neesham with a lot more kind of international pedigree, but he's also older, so that could be a little bit of an element to this announcement as well. But there's the fact that you could reel off just like a half a dozen players without even needing to really think about it, of guys who most most, if not all of those guys, I think everyone except Mitch Hay, you said, has played already for the Blackcaps in some extent. That's some nice depth. And when you get a lot of nice depth, you get a lot of different players getting options. You get to have that choice of being like, well, whoever scores the runs, whoever takes the wickets, we keep picking them. And that's it's a bit of a situation that the Blackcaps find themselves in now, which we'll probably see over the next, I don't know, 12 months, whatever, until the next time the contracts are announced, of like this jostling for positions where there are suddenly all these players, because you've got these guys who are established Blackcaps who will still play for the Blackcaps a fair bit in some cases, but aren't on the contract list. You've got contracted guys who supposedly are going to get games, and you've got guys even who don't have contracts yet, but are clearly pushing towards getting contracts in the future. There's a lot of shuffling in that deck to be done, you know?
And that shuffling is organised by runs and wickets.
Exactly.
So whoever scores the most runs, take the most wickets, will get the job. And that is the niche cast where we're not banging out double centuries, but we're averaging, 41.
We sort of did today.
We did.
2 hours of podcast is a double century worth of podcast.
Yeah, but we're averaging 41 with the bat, and I'd say a healthy 26 with the ball, both of which are pretty damn good. So shout out to us. Shout out to you for being here with us, listening to our almighty Aotearoa Sporting Yarns. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Church.